Hi, welcome to If You Live It. I'm Mason Wooldridge, the author of the book, If You Live It, that this entire thing is based around. We're going to do a quick introduction of the video to follow. It's about a half-hour long-form spiritual conversation that's filled with so much truth, all surrounding how do we actually surrender? How do we actually let go? How do we come from a place where we are finding out how to do these things that we've been told to do so much in our life? There are two resources I wasn't able to get into because the conversation came fast and furious to you. First resource, want to go over Loving What Is by Byron Katie. This book teaches a process called the work that you should check out to help you see what's true about your thoughts, what's false about them. Phenomenal. The best DIY self-help book I've ever found in my entire life. Next is a book that has a big and a special place in my heart, Letting Go, The Power, The Pathway of Surrender by Dr. David R. Hawkins. Extremely, extremely valuable. Quickly, 4 main parts in this video. We're going to introduce the video as the first part. Introduce surrender. What is it? Why is it important? Why should you care? Part 2 of the video, timestamp-wise, is step 1 in the surrender process. Part 3, timestamp-wise, is step 2 in the process. And then the last piece of this video is step 3 of the surrender process, a 3-step actual how do I do it. Again, Mason Wooldridge, peace, love. If you live it, check this video out. Stay with this. It will change your life. Many blessings. I'm out of here. Welcome to If You Live It. Welcome to a conversation about truth. Today, we're diving into surrender. This is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series for the next 3 Friday conversations where we look at surrender, forgiveness, and gratitude. We go deeper into each of these based off of the program of If You Live It, based off of the book If You Live It. That is the central pillar of everything that we're talking about, why this channel exists, why the website If You Live It exists, why the book exists, is to look at the 12 steps that were originally created for Alcoholics Anonymous, recontextualized in this process for the purpose of looking deeper into surrender, forgiveness, and gratitude as the 3 stages to God, to your own experience of truth, to your own reality of knowing if God is real or not. By actually putting into practice spiritual principles, these 12 steps specifically, as well as other things, that put you into a momentum, into a forward progress that allows you to know for yourself, have your own experience of the reality of God. Not wondering if God's real, reading about God, hoping God is, believing something within a religion. This is transcending religion. This is applying spiritual principles into your life so that you have your own experience with God, so that you can speak from firsthand experience about what it's like to connect with God, about how your life will forever be changed by the process of chasing after God and then having your own realizations of the self, of truth, classically called enlightenment, reaching a state of nirvana, as some would call it. Today, we're diving deeper into surrender. The first 3 steps of the program of If You Live It, the first 3 steps of any 12-step program, many don't realize, but are actually surrender in practice. How do you do it? Many of you watching this, just like myself for many years, would hear, just let go. You need to surrender. And then just like so many other self-help books or religious teachings or spiritual dogmas or all these different things that would be around the internet in book form, people would be saying, they say to do these things without telling you how to do them. And for the longest time, specifically in this life, I remember having pastors tell me to do something. Or I remember reading a book that says, this is how you find more abundance or more happiness or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And they say, you need to do this, 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 and that. But you could tell actually that they don't know what they're talking about. And I don't mean that they weren't pointing back to sources that had validity to them. I mean, they weren't speaking from firsthand experience of the own reality as the byproduct of what they're trying to teach you. Religion doesn't teach you how to surrender. It doesn't teach you how to forgive. It doesn't teach you how to come from a place of gratitude. It tells you you should have these things. You should be these things. You should do these things. But in reality, when you go deeper into your religions, when you go deeper into Christianity and you see where you should serve, you can find surrender and forgiveness through service. is a big place. You can see what surrender, you can see what forgiveness looks like in the form of Jesus. You could look and see what surrender looks like in the teachings of Krishna. You could see how to apply spiritual principles in the Eightfold Path. But you have to do them yourself. You can't listen to other people tell you about them and expect them to stick. You can't read someone saying you should let go and you should surrender and find a little bit of relief in reading about it and being here now, but not actually coming from someone who's actually telling you what it's like to actually be there, how to get there, how to do it. They're talking about what they suppose, or a glimpse in time where they had a realization that's now fleeting. What we're talking about here today in this video is, how do you actually surrender? What does it look like? What are the byproducts of it? What are the steps to it? What is a mechanistic reduction of it? So we're going to start with the 3 steps that are found in If You Live It. I'm going to read them, and we're going to kind of break down each particular one and go a little bit deeper into each one. So let's jump into the first one. Again, these are found on ifyouliveit.com. They are found in the book, If You Live It. We talk about them in more detail in videos that we've already covered in steps 1, 2, and 3. So if you want more information about each one of these particular steps, go back into the video catalog. Look up chapter 1, step 1, chapter 2, step 2, chapter 3, step 3, and you have much more information about each piece of this. And then you can look back at videos diving deeper into those first 3, and you will see where we talk more about that particular step. But here we're going to do our best to kind of synopsize and give you bite-sized chunks and applicability that you can leave this video today and you can say, actually, I think I know what surrender looks like now, how to do it, how to apply it, how to make it part of my life. So let's jump right in. Step 1. From the program of If You Live It and any 12-step group, slightly rewritten here for the purpose of transcending the ego, not alcoholism. Alcoholism is a byproduct of things that we don't need to get into today. If you find yourself addicted to alcohol, drugs, sex, food, any of these things where you're legitimately addicted to it, do not use this source as the program. Go to those meetings, be part of those communities, find a sponsor, start serving that community. Work the steps, finish them from that capacity. This is for a general audience who has an enslavement to the ego, which is everyone. So it's actually for the entire world, but it's not for the specific purpose of transcending alcoholism or another ism. This is transcending ego, fear, illusion, that which separates us from God. So let's dive in. Step 1. I admit I am powerless over my ego, and my life up until this point has been managed and run by it. But I am ready to find truth despite not knowing it personally yet. So step 1, I admit I am powerless over my ego. The first stage of the surrender process is by looking at something, not trying to change it, and then admitting you're powerless over it. So let's take something, for example. Let's take sugar. Let's take ice cream. During the COVID time, when everything was shut down and the world was kind of topsy-turvy in the place where businesses weren't open and you couldn't go out and you couldn't go to restaurants and you couldn't be part of this larger community. Where I live, there was this ice cream shop that was open. And it was open in such a way where you were waiting outside and one person, then 2 people, then 3 people, then up to 5, or however it kind of graduated to over time, were allowed into it while you were socially distanced. But you could go into this place and you could spend money and you could get ice cream. And it was a lifeline for the community. It was a lifeline for me. But what ended up happening was 20, 30 pounds were put on over about a year's time because I was having 3, 4, 5 banana splits a week. Because it was how I could get out. It's how I could see people. It's how I could interact. It's how I could feel part of a larger community again. And I'm not someone that needs or gets energy by the extroverted mechanisms of being out in the world and gathering energy from being around people. But it was a way to kind of sidestep being so isolated. And so we would go to Blue Ribbon, this wonderful ice cream place, socially distanced, and we would get ice cream. And it's this old school, ice cream counter it's this wonderful place where I live. And I would get ice cream and I would get banana splits. And I found myself addicted to sugar, needing it, wanting it, getting it. And even though I would try to not go back and get more ice cream, I would still inevitably go back and get more ice cream. Now, In reality, was that going to kill me at the time? No. Was it special circumstances? Yes. But that need for sugar continued. And because of the alcoholism that's part of my past, in reality, my body craves sugar in a way that maybe others don't because of the amount of sugar I put into it over time. Maybe some of you can relate to this, maybe some of you can't, but we're just picking one thing in time. I had to look at this continuation of getting banana splits. And what I would do is I would substitute the chocolate for peanut butter, and it was even better. It was phenomenal. You had the peanut butter instead of the chocolate. Oof, beautiful. What happened was I had to admit I was powerless over this compulsion to go get banana splits. And earlier in life, I had a much more serious compulsion, which was to alcohol, where it inevitably led to full tilt, 100 miles per hour alcoholism, where it was just getting, it had reached a place where death was coming, and we've talked about it in many things. But in that particular capacity, it took the miracle of God relieving that alcoholism, removing it to give me a respite to find sanity in. And this, we're just making a lighthearted attempt at making an example. And this example was ice cream and sugar. I was powerless over it. I couldn't hide from it. If you try to hide from the thing that you're powerless over, let's think about it in this way. Thoughts arise inside of your mind. You have a mind, you're not the mind. Thoughts rise, you don't ask them to arise. You can look at something and then you could bring thought into awareness around a thing. That's much different than sitting there and all of a sudden a lustful thought, a fearful thought, a worry, guilt, or shame, happiness, joy, thoughts around what we might want to get, excitement, so on and so forth pop up. We don't ask for these things, they arise. Then they can turn into feelings, and uninvestigated thoughts turn into these feelings. And then usually when there's a feeling, if it is something that we would call negative, we try to hide from it. If it's something we would call positive, we try to engage in it. And then we get engulfed by it, and then we get consumed by it. And then the dopamine starts running, and then all of a sudden it's no longer about the thing, it's about getting the thing. We get the thing, and then we're stuck in the American cycle of more, and that thing isn't actually what we want anymore, and we actually want the car that's 1 year newer because it has different headlights, because that'll make us feel good, right? You have to look at it when we talk about surrender as part one. You have to see it for what it is. Don't try to change it. When that thought arises into awareness, don't look away from it. Sit with it. Be in it. That thought of getting that ice cream. What is it at the root of getting the ice cream that is powerless, where powerlessness comes from? Powerless comes from the fact that we didn't ask that thought to arise. We didn't ask that compulsion to be present. We didn't ask for the desire to present itself. That's where you find powerlessness. That's where the ego, through thoughts and feelings and emotions, starts gaining ground. It's in the belief systems that we are these thoughts that arise, these feelings that arise, these emotions that arise. So when we look at step one in the surrender process, we look at it and we admit we are powerless over it. We are powerless over it from arising, from becoming and gaining momentum. That's what we're powerless over. We're powerless over it presenting itself. So if you look away from the feeling or the thought or the emotion that causes what we would say pain, and you don't actually look at it and realize you didn't ask for it to be present, but it is present, and if you don't ever look at it, you can't see it for something that is other than what you actually are. And if you don't look at it, you can never reach a point where you can realize you're powerless over it because you didn't ask for it to arise in the first place. We are powerless over everything that comes at us because we're not asking for it. If we actually had control over thoughts, feelings, and emotions and the mind in general, we could control whatever we ever wanted to experience, but we don't. It comes at us, in reality, for us to see it for what it is. It's a mechanism to surrender, to move past, to transcend in order to have an actual experience of something that brings happiness. But when it comes at us for the first time, and many times, it reaches this boiling point where we believe we're these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, this desire for a banana split. I can't tell you how many times I would actually eat that banana split and I would get halfway through it and I wouldn't even want to finish it, but I would because, well, you got to finish the banana split or it melts. They're gross if you leave them in the freezer and you try to come back to them. You have to look at it. You have to see it. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it. You have to actually look at it. And there's all kinds of really cool things that you can learn about quantum physics and the molecular makeup and buildup of things and actions versus inactions and counteractions and how just looking at something changes it. But for the purpose of this aspect of surrender, the spiritual principle and activity of surrender, it starts with looking at it, not looking away from it. When you feel that negative emotion, that negative feeling, don't have another drink. Don't get another sundae. Don't hide from it. Don't go see a movie. Don't go buy something. Don't go have sex again. Look at it. Don't look away. Spirituality takes courage, real courage and honesty, to not hide from the things that we feel are less than, or that we have shame around, or that we have guilt around. It's looking at the shame, watching it arise. One thing you'll see is any thought and really feeling or emotion, when it presents itself, if you don't try to change it, if you don't try to hide from it, you just watch it, 15 minutes, 30 minutes kind of at the tops, it will recede and it'll be like it was never there. But we hide from it. When we hide from something, it builds momentum. It gets bigger, larger, harder to overcome because we have given it energy that it doesn't deserve. We've given it energy in the capacity where it can grow, where more fear is surrounding it. So we look at it. We admit we're powerless over it. That's really step one. And in everyone on this planet, save a few, we're all powerless over our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, byproducts of the ego. The ego being that which is designed to keep us separate from the reality of what we actually are as being God. This entire world is created for this seeming separateness so that we would have the choice to surrender over what we believe we are for the reality of what we actually are. Okay, so that's step one of the surrender process. Step two, I have come to believe that a power greater than myself can remove the blocks to transcending my ego. And in and of myself, I do not have the power to do so. So step one is we look at it. We admit we're powerless over it. Step two is believing that something greater than ourselves, choosing to acknowledge that we need something greater than ourselves to relieve this suffering, to relieve this belief system, to remove it from its paradigm of existence. All right, so we look at it in step one. We admit we're powerless over it. Big, and our life has become run by it. See, in alcoholism, I knew for a long time I was an alcoholic. I knew it because I knew I had a compulsion to drink that I couldn't stop. And I knew that compulsion led to being drunk constantly. But I had not reached a point where my life had become ruined by it. It wasn't until life had reached a point where it was near expiration that I realized I was not only powerless over this substance called alcohol, but my life is now managed by it, ruined by it. Into step two, I admitted that in and of myself, all I had ever done to get to that point had brought me to the point where I was powerless over this, where my life was managed by it, and I needed something greater than myself to relieve that suffering. So step one is the humility to admit we're powerless and that our life is managed by it. When we look at the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, you're run by your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. You're run by dopamine. You're run by this neurotransmitter of getting. You're run by your fears. You're run by the lesser than. You're run by it. And your life is unmanageable because of it, because you can't stop it. Not with the power that you have or you would have. And then into step two, as we're talking about right now, step two is really admitting, having humility to say, there has to be something greater than me that helps relieve this. Something bigger than myself. Some purpose, some energy, something that can come in and relieve this and remove this. And I need to rely on this because I need help, because in and of myself, where I have come to is this place where I need the help. I need it. With regards to the banana splits, I needed them to shut down and not be open 7 days a week, but that wasn't going to happen. So I needed God to come in and remove the craving. Help me move past this compulsion, this habitual response to the stress of the world being upside down, and finding some relief in the sugar that came from these banana splits. The second part of the surrender process, after we've admitted we're powerless over something, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions of fear, or position we find ourselves in this particular life, a relationship we're in, a job that we find ourselves in, whatever. Not having enough, being exhausted, as a parent, and waking up for the fourth time in the middle of the night, 3 times in the middle of the night to change a diaper, and you just don't even feel like you have the ability to go any further and not yell at your children. You're powerless over it. You're powerless over tiredness and fatigue. You're powerless over how the body is responding to breaking down, right? You need relief. You're not going to find it in your willpower at that point in time because you don't have any. You're barely holding on. You're barely hanging on. You have to have the humility. You have to choose the humility to say, I need help. I need help. I need help from something greater than whatever it is I am, because what I am is barely hanging on. Okay, so one is looking at it, admitting we're powerless over it because we can't stop that thing from coming in. Can't stop that fear from being present. Can't stop that worry. Can't stop that rumination, or else we would. We'd snap our finger and it'd be gone. But you can't do that. Okay? And then our life has been now managed by these thoughts, these feelings, and these emotions, this compulsion for sugar, this compulsion for sex, this compulsion for getting, this compulsion to believe that I need something in order to be something that I'm not. That comes from outside of myself. If I get that car, if I get that house, if I get that relationship, if I get that clothes, if I lose those 10 pounds, if I do this with my face, if I get Botox, if I get fake breasts, if I get a penis implant, if I get whatever these things are, I'll just be happy. No, you won't. You will not be happy. Because there's nothing in the exterior world that creates internal happiness by getting something. You find happiness by giving away, by being humble, by serving, by surrendering, forgiving, coming from a place of gratitude. So part one, step one, we see it. We don't hide from it. We watch it. We don't try to change it. Step two, we realize that this thing came in that's outside of our power, outside of our control, and that we don't have the ability to snap our finger and have it go away and not be present ever again as what we are. And we need something greater than ourselves to come in and remove this, okay? So it's in the honesty of saying we're powerless over it. 2, the honesty of saying we need something greater than whatever it is we possess to help remove this thing, help us move past this thing. And then into 3. Step 3. I make the decision here and now to turn my will and life over to Thee, O Lord. I choose love in the face of fear, your power instead of the forces of the ego, and I accept grace as the gift I don't fully understand. In simpler form, I give it to Thee. I give it to Thee. That's all it takes. Now, in this third step, this third piece of surrender, what are you giving? You're giving the powerlessness over. You're giving the predilection towards getting over. You're giving the disease of more over. You're giving your belief system over to a power greater than yourself. You've looked at it, you haven't tried to change it. You've admitted you need help from something greater than yourself, and now you're asking something greater than yourself to remove this thing, to set you on firm ground, on proper footing. The way this looks every moment of every day for the person speaking to you right now is that any thought that arises is watched. Every one, around the clock. And whatever it is given to God. And the way that it looks as an internal dialogue is, let's say right now, the desire to look at pornography arises. We'll just say as an example, many people around the world suffer with this need to look at pornography. The desire of pornography arises. I watch it. I inspect it. I hold it in mind without changing it to see the root of it. Where is this coming from? Now, at this point in time in life, it's no longer a personal thing. It's coming out of the collective. So what is this thing that needs to be surrendered over? Is it coming from a person? Is it coming from a group of people, from an institution, from a generalized consensus? What out of the collective needs to be seen in this particular stimuli that's arising into awareness? Step 1. Step 2, I know that it's not me that is going to remove this for people. It's Thee that is going to remove this for people. And then that moves it into, to Thee, O Lord, this imagery, this energy, this belief system, this fear, this thought, this whatever is surrendered over. Please remove it. Please forgive it. Please take it. So, to thee, O Lord, I surrender over this thought. I surrender over this feeling that's arising, this feeling of craving, this feeling of wanting, this feeling of belief that if I do this thing, or I look at this thing, or I eat this thing, or I get this thing, that happiness will be found there. And I surrender it to thee for your will to be done. And then let God do the rest. And that is the 3-step surrender process. You look at it, don't try to change it. Knowing that if you could, it wouldn't even be present to start with. 2, that it has to be a power greater than yourself that takes this thing on. Because in and of yourself, you don't have the power to take this on. Not while you're in this body, not while you're here having to deal with this content. Because don't forget, this entire thing is about dealing with content. To have a choice. Am I going to choose God? Am I going to choose surrender? Or am I going to choose to believe, I have it all figured out? Step 3 is giving it to that power greater than yourself. In practice, thought, feeling, emotion arises. Watch it. Don't try to change it. Sit with it. Jump to, I know it's going to require a power greater than myself to remove this, to see through it, to transcend it, to see the truth of it. Step 3, this is happening fast. Thoughts arising. I'm looking at it. To thee, O Lord, this is surrendered over. If this continues, I haven't seen it. I haven't looked at it long enough. I haven't meditated on it. I haven't seen the point of it arising quite yet. Just because you surrender something over once doesn't mean it's gone. At the root of the surrender process is pulling back the layers of the onion. It's pulling back the layer and 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 getting you to the core of what you have to see. What truth is at the root of it that you've told a lie about that sponsored this thing on and 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 on. When I was a young person, 4, 5, 6, my parents got a divorce. And then it was my mother and I, and we were on our own for a while. And my dad took off. And at the time, I didn't know that he took off to continue being an alcoholic, to continue being a philanderer. I didn't know that he had been cheating on my mom. I didn't know that he had been drinking and driving with me in the car and that was bad. I didn't know that he had chosen alcoholism and a different life instead of being a father and a husband and raising me. I didn't know this, right? So what was left was my mom, who I blamed for him leaving. Then my mother finds someone else a couple years later and decides to marry this person and moves us into a different area of the country, a different area of the state, away from what I would call home, away from friends, away from a community, and into the country. And now we're here in the country, and now she's getting remarried. And my father leaving, them getting a divorce, her getting remarried, okay, then turns into a world where my father dies right after my 11th birthday. And what happens is there was this fear of abandonment that became solidified. Now, the abandonment was there when he left. The abandonment was there when she got remarried. I wasn't actually abandoned, but this is the story I was telling myself. This is the root of this onion, okay? Then he dies. And now there's a physical abandonment where one pillar of my life was gone, taken, didn't know why. Left with all these questions and no answers. Then my mother has new children, my brothers. And now this story of abandonment takes on another layer and another layer and another layer and another layer. And then it became stories about women. And then it became stories about what women do. And then it became stories about what life is. And then it became stories about who I would be if I was a father and why I never wanted to be one and never wanted to be married. And then it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. And we don't see this. This is subconscious programming that's taking place. These are uninvestigated thoughts that I didn't know how to surrender over as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, so on and so on and so on. All the way until sobriety presented itself and these steps were being worked. And I was able to go back in the 4th step and I was able to look at the beginning of this forgiveness phase, which will be another video, which was part 2 of this 3-part series. And I was able to see that at the root of this surrender process was the fear of abandonment. And when I got to the root of it, after surrendering and surrendering and around the clock for months, nonsense that was arising. I saw that surrender is not something that we even understand the power of, because we're not the ones doing it. The power of surrender is because we're not the ones doing it. It's a power greater than ourselves that is showing us what we need to see at the root of it. And when I saw abandonment, to thee needed to be surrendered as well, to thee being God. To thee, O Lord, I surrender over this abandonment, this fear of it, the illusion of abandonment. What you see is at the core of that onion is an illusion. That something has happened to you, or you're somewhere in the universe outside of God. You're never alone. You have angels with you all the time. God is present everywhere all the time. You're never abandoned by God. You can't be, because what you are is God. When I saw that, the whole house of cards fell, and life started in a momentum upwards towards God that has never stopped. But at the root of all these things, that all these thoughts, all these feelings, all these emotions, that had a surrender not been presented to me, and actually knowing how to do it with regards to this program, what it was, what it looked like, what surrender actually is, looking at it, not trying to change it, admitting something more powerful than yourself needs to help you with this, because you and of yourself have arrived at this place where you don't have the power to do anything about it, and then giving it to a power greater than something, than myself, than yourself. Had these 3 steps not been present in my life, I don't know where we'd be today. I wouldn't be talking to you. I probably wouldn't be here. I know I wouldn't be here. This surrender thing is real, folks. It is the first thing that can set you free. Surrender. So that's the end of this particular Friday conversation. I hope you found something in here of value. We're going to keep going into this deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper as these videos continue. But don't forget, if you want to go deeper past what we just talked about, go back into our video catalog and look at chapter 1 through chapter 3 on YouTube. You can go to ifyouliveit.com and you can find these in written form, these chapters available to you for free. And by the time you're watching this, the If You Live It, the book is probably available on your bookshelves or anywhere that you buy books online, so you can have the book in its entire form in your hand. And then go back into our diving deeper videos as well on YouTube, diving deeper into step 1 and step 2 and 3. Now you'll find that under diving deeper into shame and guilt and apathy and grief and fear and desire, and you'll see this, okay? So you'll find it in our video catalog on our different playlists, and you can dive deeper into it. Thank you for being present here for this. Look forward to seeing what the Holy Spirit delivers to you for forgiveness, and then for gratitude. Many blessings on a beautiful day, however you're finding this, wherever you are finding this. Peace and love.